Section 10 of A Cruising Voyage Around the World. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by K. Hand. A Cruising Voyage Around the World by Woodes Rogers. At Guiaquil, Part 1. April 13th. We appointed an officer to every 10 men to prevent disorders and straggling ashore. The committee, having agreed on our method of command, left it to us jointly and vigorously to attack the enemy ashore. We knew that misfortunes attend sailors when out of their element, and hearing that they began to murmur about the encouragement they were to expect for landing, which they alleged was a risk more than they were shipped for, to prevent their desertion, which we had reason to apprehend, since they were a mixed gang of most European nations, we the commanders agreed on the most plausible methods we could then think of, to form a good discipline among 'em, if possible, and to give 'em all needful encouragement, that we might depend on their good order and bravery, and therefore came to the following resolves. Whereas, as it is agreed to land and take the town of Guiaquil, we fully resolve to do it with all manner of privacy and dispatch, and that we ourselves and our men may have full encouragement to attempt it bravely and cheerfully, we publish this following order. In prime, all manner of bedding and clothes without stripping, all manner of necessaries, gold rings, buckles, buttons, liquors, and provisions for our own expending and use, with all sorts of arms and ammunition, except great guns for ships, is plunder, and shall be divided equally amongst the men of each ship with their prizes, whether aboard or ashore, according to the whole shares. 2. It is also agreed that any sort of wrought silver or gold crucifixes, gold and silver watches, or any other movables found about the prisoners, or wearing apparel of any kind, shall likewise be plunder, provided always we make this reserve, that money and women's earrings with loose diamonds, pearls, and precious stones be excepted. And if anything is short and omitted in this publication, we do hereby declare, that when this expedition is over, every particular man shall have a hearing, or the persons already appointed for the company of both ships may come to us and insist on what is or ought to be deemed plunder, either more or less than what is here inserted. And that a general committee of the officers of both ships shall immediately meet, and at once resolve if any mores is or ought to be plunder. And that we shall give all manner of encouragement without fraud to the owners, or prejudice to ourselves, officers and men, in the same manner as agreed on at the island of St. Vincent on this head. Provided always that our intent and meaning for the men's encouragement be not made liable to a construction prejudicial to the owners or ship's company's interest. And that under pretence of the aforesaid movables allowed to be plunder, no person whatsoever do seize on or clandestinely hide any wrought or unwrought gold or silver, pearls, jewels, diamonds, and other precious stones, which are not found about the prisoners or their wearing apparel, which shall be accounted a high misdemeanor and punished severely. And that no person do presume to keep any plunder, but immediately deliver it to his officers publicly, and carry it directly to the place appointed for plunder. In case this or any other town, fort, ships, or the like be taken in this expedition by storm, then the same encouragement shall be allowed each man as agreed on at St. Vincent, over and above the gratuity promised by the owners, to such as shall signalize themselves in time of action, as by their instrument appears. But if any party of ours, or the whole, or any separate body, shall be engaged with the enemy on shore, and become victors, then all prisoners, the money, arms, and movables about 'em are immediately on that place to be brought to the officer or officers of that body or party, and put into a general stock, to be divided proportionately amongst those only of our men that were engaged in that action, who are to enjoy the whole reputation and right of it to themselves. And though there has been nothing yet taken worth a division of plunder, we don't question but the effecting this good enterprise will equally encourage us all, and that we shall gladly and expeditiously get the wealth of the town brought to the places appointed on shore. There shall at the same time be several places appointed, and men to receive Plunder, and a sufficient time before we leave the Town allow'd to ship it off by itself, and men appointed to take care and an Account of it, which, with all other Plunder, shall be enter'd in public Books. And when we come on board, we hope and design to divide it equally to the satisfaction of all concerned. And to prevent all manner of pernicious and mischievous ill conduct that may accrue by Disorders on shore, we pressingly remind you, that any Officer or other that shall be so brutish as to be drunk ashore in an Enemy's Country shall not only be severely punished, but lose all share of whatsoever is taken in this Expedition. The same Punishment shall be inflicted on any that disobeys Command, or runs from his Post, discourages our Men, or is cowardly in any Action, or presumes to burn or destroy anything in the Town without our Order, or for mischief's sake; or that shall be so sneakingly barbarous to debauch themselves with any Prisoners on shore, where we have more generous things to do, both for our own benefit and the future reputation of ourselves and our Country. We shall always take care to keep Prisoners of the best note as pledges for our Men that may be accidentally missing; for as soon as any Man is wanting, we shall engage the Spaniards to bring him to us, or give a satisfactory Account of him. But we desire no Man to trust to this, or be a moment from his Officers and Post. And if all the foregoing Rules be strictly follow'd, we hope to exceed all other Attempts of this Nature before us in these Parts, and not only to enrich and oblige our selves and Friends, but even to gain Reputation from our Enemies. Dated and signed on board the Duke, the 13th of April, 1709. Thomas Dover, President. Stephen Courtney, Wood Rogers. April 14. This morning we got all our Arms, Ammunition, and Provisions, with part of our Men, &c. aboard. Our Bark being the largest, we took in part of Captain Courtney's Men; and his Bark carrying the rest, we stood into the great Bay of Guiaquil all night, designing to leave the Ships a good distance at Sea, for fear of being discovered from the Town called Tombs, which lying on the Starboard side going in, would ruin our Design. Wind at the South, but very little. Latitude 4° 23', 85° 42'. April 15. At Break of Day we saw a Ship between us and the Land. Being calm, we sent off both our Pinnaces, mann'd and arm'd. But our Men expecting no Resistance from that Ship, they hurried from us, left out their Swivel Gun, and carried but a slender Stock of Arms with them. My Brother John Rogers being unfortunately aboard our Ship to assist me in getting ready, because he was to be Lieutenant of my Company ashore, he stepped into our Boat. I had before this opposed his landing, which he resented as a slight; and this hindered me stopping him now, though it was not his business, he being Second Lieutenant of our Consort, and we having Officers enough of our own for that Service: but Mr. Frye, who commanded the Boat, being related to us, was the occasion of my Brother's willingness to go as a Volunteer with him. The Dutchess's Pinnace was worse provided than ours, and had not Arms enough for their Men, as Captain Cook told me afterwards. About 9 a Clock our Boat came within shot of the Ship, which proved to be the French built Ship belonging to Lima, the same we have been a cruising for. They hoisted their Spanish Ensign in its place, and a Flag at their Top Mast head, which our Boats took to be the Bishop's Banner, because it was broad, made of white Satin, and fringed, which was unusual Colours in Ships. They fired a Gun at our Boat, which lay still above half an hour before the Dutchess Pinnace came up, she not rowing so well as ours. When they came up, Captain Cook, Mr. Frye, and my Brother consulted how to begin the Attack with advantage. They agreed that our Boat should ply her under the Stern, and the other on the Bow, till they could get near enough to board at once. But when they came up, the Spaniards brought a Gun right aft, and upwards of 20 small Arms pointed into the Boats, so that the Fight began before they could reach the Station agreed on, and both were forced to engage the Enemy abaft, where they had 5 Guns mounted. Our people were constrained to fall astern twice, after the loss of 1 man killed and 3 wounded. The Boats and Sails were much damaged by the Enemy's Partridge shot, yet they again attempted to come up and board her. At this Attack my unfortunate Brother was shot through the Head, and instantly died, to my unspeakable sorrow. But as I began this voyage with the resolution to go through it, and the greatest misfortune or obstacle shall not deter me, I'll as much as possible avoid being thoughtful and afflicting myself for what can't be recalled, but indefatigably pursue the concerns of the voyage, which has hitherto allowed little respite. Our men, upon this disaster, left engaging, and put all their spare men and arms into the Dutchess's boat, who was to keep between the enemy and the shore, to prevent them from landing their riches. Our ships having little wind, were yet at a distance, and our boat came aboard after noon, with 2 dead and 3 wounded men. April 16. We got possession of the Spanish ship about 2 yesterday in the afternoon. She had upwards of 50 Spaniards and above 100 Negroes, Indians, and Mulattoes on board. They would not strike till within half shot of our ships. The Dutchess, being somewhat nearest, fired 2 shot over her, and then she struck and bore down to us. But we missed the Bishop, who 10 days before landed at Point St. Helena, with his attendants, plate, &c., designing to stop at Guiaquil. This morning we saw a small sail under the shore. We sent our pinnace and the Beginning, who brought her off to us. She proved a small bark from Payta, with soap, cassa, fistula, and leather. About 12 we read the prayers for the dead, and threw my dear brother overboard, with one of our sailors, another lying dangerously ill. We hoisted our colours but half mast up. We began first, and the rest followed, firing each some volleys of small arms. All our officers expressed a great concern for the loss of my brother, he being a very hopeful active young man, a little above 20 years of age. April 17. We made ready to go ashore, and read the encouragement agreed on the 13th to the men, who all expressed themselves well pleased with the undertaking, and were so forward to land, that they make all the interest possible to go ashore; not considering that we must secure a safe retreat, by leaving a sufficient number on board our ships to man 'em and guard our prisoners: but it was a proof of their courage, since the advantage was alike, either to stay on board or go ashore. To prevent their straggling when landed, we gave each man a ticket, that he might remember what company he belonged to, and appointed the best and soberest man we could pick to command every 10 men under the captains. Captain Courtney and I, being willing to compliment our present Captain Dover, agreed that he should have the preference in command at our landing; being a considerable owner in our ship, he had an equal 3rd part of the men allotted to be under his command whilst ashore; we were afterwards to take it in turns. April 18. Yesterday afternoon Captain Courtney and I settled every thing on board our ships and prizes, and got all the men designed for landing on board the Barks. We proportioned the rest, and put Irons on board every ship, because having many more prisoners than we could leave men to guard 'em, we must have 'em well secured. We agreed to leave on board the Duke 42 men and boys, sick and well, Robert Fry Commander; 37 aboard the Dutchess, Edward Cook Commander; 14 aboard the Galleon, John Bridge Master; 14 aboard Havre de Grace, Robert Nolman Master; and 4 aboard the Beginning, Henry Duck Master; the whole being 111, and 201 were designed for the shore. The prisoners on board were above 300, more than one half Spaniards and Indians, and the rest Negroes. The Captain and 7 of the chief Spaniards taken in the last prize, I carried aboard our Bark to go with us to the Town, fearing they might be dangerous Persons to leave behind us. Last midnight we left the Ships, every thing being in good order aboard both Embarkations. We were, when we parted, about 9 Leagues distant from the Island Sancta Clara, and not less than 36 from Guiaquil. We order'd Captain Cook and Fry to keep at Sea undiscover'd 48 hours, and then to make the best of their way to Point Arena, and stay there at an Anchor till our return, having engaged Sen. Morell and another Spaniard to be their Pilots. At about 12 this day we passed by the Island Sancta Clara, having little Wind, and the Weather very hot. This Island appears like a Core extended, therefore the Spaniards call it Morto; it's not above 2 miles long. We left it on the Starboard side, which is not the Ships Channel, for none enter that way but Barks, by reason of Shoals both on the Island and toward the Main within it to the Northward. About 10 last night we came to an Anchor in sight of Point Arena with both Barks, not being able to stem the Tide. At 4 in the Morning we weighed, when Captain Courtney and I, with our Boat and 40 Men, left the Barks, and order'd 'em to lie at Puna one Tide after us, that we might have time to surprize Guiaquil before they should appear in sight of it to alarm them; for we had notice that they keep a Look out a League below the Town. We reach'd about half way to Puna, and landed on the Island, where we staid during the Ebb Tide, and hid our Boats under the Mangrove Branches. This Island is not passable, being full of thick Mangroves and Swamps, that swarm with Mosquitos. April 20. Yesterday in the Evening we rowed and towed one another with the Flood, that if seen in the Night we might look like Drift Timber. We had an excellent Indian Pilot that advised us to come to a Graplin about 11 at Night, to lie in our Boats about a mile short of the Town, and to surprize 'em by Break of Day. We took his advice, but just as we got in by the Town, saw 2 Lights by the Water side in Bark Logs, which we secured with all the Canoes; but an Indian escaping, he alarm'd the People about the Church, who ran into the Woods before we could reach the Houses. However, we secured the Lieutenant that governs here, with his Family, and about 20 others, who assured us there could be nobody to give notice of us to Guiaquil, now we had secured them, and the rest being fled to the Woods. We sent some of our Men, who took the Look outs at their Posts, and cut all their Canoes and Bark Logs to pieces there, and also at the Town. The Day was hot, and 2 of our Men finding Liquors in the Houses, got drunk betimes. This place has about 30 Houses and a small Chapel. We found a Spanish Paper here that gave us some uneasiness. It was directed to the Lieutenant, who had the chief Command here, and ordered him to keep a strict Watch, signifying that they had notice of Captain Dampier's coming Pilot to a Squadron into the Seas. The Copy of this Paper was sent from Lima to all inhabited Places on the Coast of Peru, signifying that the French were on the first notice to fit out after us; and the Bark that came from Paita told us of 2 great Ships that lay in Cayo Road, and one at Pisco, besides 2 in Concepcion, a Port of Chili; being all French Frigates from 40 to 50 Guns and upwards, notwithstanding the Report of their not coming into these Seas any more. But to our great satisfaction we are certain that we were not discover'd before this, and that it's next to impossible any sufficient Force can arm out from Lima to be here in less than 24 days, by which time we hope to finish and be gone where they cannot find us. But since we perceive their Accounts of us imperfect, and that they believe a Squadron comes under Captain Dampier's Pilotage, and he being known by the People, because he surprized this Village when last in these Seas, we agreed amongst our selves how to improve this Spanish Story of a Squadron, which I hope will not only hinder their fitting out from Lima, but even alarm them there. The Substance of this Spanish Advice Paper in English is as follows. To the Lieutenant General Don Hieronimo Boza y Solis, Corregidor and Judge of the City of St. Jago de Guiaquil, under the Jurisdiction of the Captain General for his Majesty. I have a Letter I received from his Excellency the Lord Marquis de Castel dos Reyes, Viceroy, Governor, and Captain General of these Kingdoms, with the Copy of another of that tenor following. In the Packet with Letters from Spain which I have received, there are Orders from his Majesty, giving an Account of a Squadron of 7 Sail, getting ready at London, by several Lords, from 44 to 74 Guns each, to sail to the South Sea, under the Conduct of an English Man named Dampier; that they are first to sail for Ireland in April to victual there, and afterwards to possess themselves of an Island and Harbour in these Seas, and particularly the Island of Juan Fernandez. You are to give an Account to all those Provinces where 'tis necessary, that they may take proper Measures to guard the Coasts and Harbours. Order Don Hieronimo, as soon as he receives this, to give notice of it to the People on all the Coasts under his Jurisdiction to withdraw their Cattle and Provisions, and that he don't neglect to put this in execution, that so the Enemies finding no Provision may be obliged to retire from these Seas, whither they can't bring Provision enough to maintain them for so long a Voyage. And let the said Don Hieronimo place Guards on all the Coasts and in all the Sea ports where 'tis necessary, with Orders to be vigilant, and carefully to observe every Sail that comes into any Port, and give an Account of their Numbers with the utmost Dispatch to Don Hieronimo the Corregidore, that he may send the same from one corregidore to another, till it come to the Viceroy's hands, without fail, all along the coast belonging to Don Hieronymo, and particularly that those he has given orders to, do immediately dispatch 'em for the King's service. This I trust he will do to all that can give notice of the enemy's motions, that it may be impossible for 'em to get provisions on the coast when 'tis well guarded, or in the villages of his jurisdiction, and I trust to his activity and zeal for the royal service in a matter of such weight and consequence, and that he also give notice if there be on the coasts or ports in his jurisdiction any French ships, as we hear there is in these seas, and give 'em warning of the enemy's squadron, take a certificate that he gave 'em such notice, and send it to me, that they mayn't pretend to have been surprised if the enemy get any advantage of 'em. God preserve Don Hieronymo, etc. Lima, March 20, 1709. El Marques de Castel de los Reyos, Don Hieronymo Boza de Solis, etc. The like orders are sent to the Lieutenant General and the other officers belonging to the sea coast, and the Lieutenant of Puna, etc. April 21. At 2 yesterday afternoon I left Captain Courtney and Captain Dampier at Puna, and went in quest of the Barks, admiring they did not come in sight, they being now a tide and half behind. I carried with me the Lieutenant of Puna, and went with the great Launch and our Pinnace, designing to join Captain Courtney and Captain Dampier again, who are to lie all night in the River to prevent being discovered by any Advice going before us to Guiaquil. I found the Barks about 4 a Clock, 4 Leagues below Puna. They had been with us according to Appointment, but last Night were misinform'd by the Pilot aboard the Dutchess's Bark, who brought 'em to anchor with a fair Wind below that place, thinking they had got the Length of it. Our Bark's Pilot, who was the best, being with us in the Boats. We got other Pilots at Puna, and left him aboard the Bark, where I punish'd one that I brought aboard drunk from Puna, and had him severely whipp'd before the whole Company as a terror to the rest. I was not aboard above half an hour before low water, and had just time to embark Captain Dover and part of his Company in the Launch, and as many more as we could carry in our Pinnace to get before the Barks up the River. We rowed till 12 at Night, judged it high water, and came to a Graplin. We saw lights, which we took to be Puna. It blowed fresh, was very dark, with a small rolling sea, and the Boat being deep laden and cramm'd with Men, I had rather be in a storm at sea than here. But in regard we are about a charming Undertaking, we think no Fatigue too hard. At Daybreak we saw a Bark above us in the River, we thought it to be a Stranger, and sent our Pinnace to her. I was in the Launch behind a Shoal, which we were forced to go round to get into the Channel where the Bark was. By 8 a Clock I was aboard her, and found it to be our Bark, which the honest Pilot had brought so high the last Tide. We have no sight of the Dutchess's Bark since we left her last Night. About 10 we came up with Captain Courtney and Captain Dampier, who told us they had kept a good look out, and that nothing had passed to them up the River. About noon it was high water, we lay with the Boats under the Mangroves all the ebb, and the Bark off in the River. We were now about half way up to Guiaquil from Puna, and might have gone farther, but that there was a Plantation or Farm a little higher, which would have discovered us, and alarm'd the Town, should we have gone higher before Night. April 22. It was very hot yesterday, and we were pester'd and stung grievously by the Mosquitoes, as we lay under the Mangroves. At 6 in the Evening the Bark and Boats made way up the River. By 12 at Night we were in sight of the Town with all the Boats, in which we had 110 Men. We saw a very great Fire on the top of an adjoining Hill, and Lights in the Town. In half an hour we were abreast of it, and ready to land, but saw abundance of Lights appear at once coming down the Hill, and the Town full of 'em. We inquired of the Indians, our Pilots, whether it was any Saint's Day, or what might be the occasion of it, and they answer'd us that it must be an Alarm. It was very dark whilst we lay still driving on the River; being just high water, we heard a Spaniard from the shore talking loudly that Puna was taken, and that the Enemy were coming up the River. This made us conclude it was an Alarm. Immediately after we heard their Bells making a confused Noise, and then a Volley of small Arms, and 2 great Guns. Above an hour was spent in debate betwixt Captain Dover, Captain Courtney, and myself, whether we should land. I asked the Consent of the Lieutenants in all the Boats about landing, telling 'em I supposed this to be the first Alarm, and that we had best land during their Consternation; but they differ'd in Opinion, and few were for landing in the Night. I asked Captain Dampier how the Buccaneers behaved themselves in such Cases, and he told me they never attacked any large Place after it was alarm'd. It drew near 2 in the Morning, and the Ebb run so strong that the great Boat and Yawl could not row up to land; so that it being too late to attempt the Town, I advised to fall down the River out of sight of it, to meet our Barks, and land with the Morning Flood. Upon this all our Boats drove down with the Ebb about a League below the Town, where we lay till Day break, and saw our Bark, Mr. Glendall Commander, brought by the honest Indian Pilot a Mile above us, for we had passed by him in the Night. We rowed back to him, and recruited our Men as well as we could. We found the Water fresh there, and drank of it, though yesterday it was a little brackish. The Bark lay against a Wood of tall Trees close by the Shore, and we kept a File of Musketeers with their Arms pointing into the Wood, with Orders to fire if they saw any Man; and we kept firing a Musket now and then into the Woods, to prevent Ambuscades. About 3 our Yawl and Launch came aboard, for they could not row back with us to the Bark till the Tide slackened and the Flood was coming. At 10 we saw the Dutchess's Bark come in sight. Immediately I ordered the Anchor to be got up to fall on the Town, which was about 2 miles from us; but Captain Dover opposed it, pressed that we might have a Consultation with as many of the Officers as were present, and to lie in the Boat astern of the Bark, that what was debated might not be overheard by the rest of our Company. We immediately assembled there accordingly, and Captain Dover insisted on the difficulty of attempting the Enemy now they had been so long alarm'd; alleging we should but throw away our own and our Men's Lives, or else weaken our selves so much as might occasion the loss of the remaining part of the Voyage, that chiefly brought us from England, and was our greatest Dependence; that the Town appeared large, and consequently was much more able to hold out than we to attack it; and though the Spaniards in these parts had no extraordinary fighting Character, yet if they arm'd the Mulattoes, as they generally did on the like occasions, we might find the Attempt very desperate, with other Objections not fit to recite here. He concluded that our best Method would be to send a Trumpeter with Proposals to the Enemy to trade with us for the Cargoes of Negroes and other Goods aboard our Prizes; that an immediate Meeting should be appointed, the Prices for the Negroes and Goods fixed, and good Hostages given us for the Performance within a limited time, and if they agreed to this, that we would not land. This Proposal I withstood by the best Arguments I could, and urged our landing immediately, lest the Enemy gain time by our Delays, might send off their Wealth, and get leisure to strengthen themselves so as to bid us Defiance. This being put to the Vote, the Majority was for landing, and as an Obligation to Captain Dover, who was a part Owner in our Ships, we agreed he should lead on the Attack, as he requested, and if he took the Town, he should give the Watchword that Night, and Captain Courtney and I to take it in turns after him. But this Resolution did not hold, for Captain Dover reflected on me, and said I should be answerable for all the damage that might happen to us on our landing. By these Reflections, and some other People's Indifferency, I had reason to doubt the Consequence of attempting the Enemy with Success, since we were so divided amongst ourselves. Therefore at length I yielded to send 2 of our Prisoners instead of a Trumpeter, as Captain Dover first proposed, with the foregoing Proposals. The other Prisoners in our Bark obliged themselves for the return of these 2 in less than an hour, and this Method every one seemed to be pleased with: so we put the Captain of the French built Ship and the Lieutenant of Puna ashore in our Boat, and charged them to return from the Shore in less than an hour, otherwise we would land. In the meanwhile we ran up with the other Bark, and lay against the middle of the Town at an Anchor. As we sailed up, we saw 4 Barks put off from the Town to go higher up the River, and just as the limited hour was past, we sent our Boats well manned and armed after them, who soon took and brought 'em to us. Meanwhile our Prisoners returned in a Boat from the Town, with the Spanish Master Le Camp, who discoursed with us, and told us that at his return ashore the Corregidor or Governor with another Gentleman would come off and treat with us. We soon put him ashore again, and quickly after came off the Corregidor with another Gentleman. Captain Dover and I met them in our Boat, with a Linguist, and carried them aboard one of the Barks that our Boats had taken as they endeavour'd to escape up the River. April 23. We did nothing yesterday in the Afternoon but secure the Barks, and treat with the Governor. Several of our Prisoners told us they did not doubt to find Credit here, and that they would also deal with us, so that we were in hopes of more Profit by selling our Cargoes and Negroes than if we had ransacked the Town. The Corregidore and we had verbally agreed for the Goods by the Lump, at 140 Pieces of 8 per Bale, one sort with another, and talked of the Price for other things. We parted about 5 in the Afternoon, he having desired to go ashore, that he might prevail with the other Gentlemen to agree with him, and promised to meet us 3 Commanders on board one of our Prizes at 8 in the Evening. We order'd our Linguist to get Candles lighted, and the best Entertainment we could provide for them; but the time being elapsed, and they not appearing, it gave us great reason to suspect we were tricked; therefore we sent our Boats again above the Town, and alarm'd them afresh in the Night. Our Centinels hail'd a Boat after Midnight, that came aboard us with a Gentleman, who told us he was sent from the Corregidore, with a Present of 2 Bags of Flour, 2 Sheep and 2 Hogs ready kill'd, 2 Jars of Wine and 2 of Brandy, and to assure us the Governor had been with us according to Appointment, but that one of the chief Merchants concern'd was absent. Yet he would come off in the Morning by 7 a Clock, on board one of the new Ships next the Shore, where he desired us to meet him, and requested us to believe he was a Man of Honour; for though he had been considerably reinforced since he left us, and that more Men were continually coming into the Town, he resolved to discharge yesterday's Promise, and therefore hoped we would forbear offering any Hostilities above the Town, because the Women and Children were there in Sanctuary, with little or no Wealth to prompt us to plunder them. We the 3 Commanders return'd our humble Service to the Corregidore, and our kind Thanks for his Present, being sorry we had nothing to oblige him with by way of Return; but desired he might be told from us, that we all admired at his not keeping his Word according to Appointment, and still depended that he would convince us he was a Man of Honour, by meeting us at 7 in the Morning, where we agreed last Night, otherwise our Treaty was at an end. We were all uneasy till 7 in the Morning, when we saw a Flag of Truce aboard the new Ship, and supposing the Governor to be there, we manned our Pinnace, and sent our Linguists to give our Promise, that if the Corregidore came aboard the Bark our Prize, he should be at liberty to return. Upon this, he with 3 more came aboard, and we order'd our 2 Frigate Barks to go close under the Shore next the best part of the Town, and that every thing should be kept in readiness for landing, lest we should not agree with these Gentlemen. Nothing else was transacted this Morning but our Conference with these Men. Our first Proposals were 50,000 Pieces of 8 Contribution for the Town, and we would deliver them their 2 Ships that lay near the Shore, and 6 Barks, provided they would oblige themselves to buy our 2 Prizes Cargoes of Goods and Negroes, and gave us sufficient Hostages for Payment within 9 days. The latter they gave us some hopes of complying with, if we would take their Words and 2 Hostages, which we thought too little. For though they came to our Price for the Goods, they would not give near that Sum for the Town and Ships, alleging they were not yet in our Power, and consequently not liable to so large Contributions; adding, that they had Men and Arms sufficient in the Town, and Ships to protect them. We all concluded by their dilatory Treaty, that they only design'd to trick us, and gain time; upon which we gave 'em this Answer, that the Ships we could have in a minute, or set them on fire; that we did not fear taking the Town at pleasure; that we looked upon it as much our own, as if it was in our possession, and must have the Money or good Hostages; otherwise before night we would set it on fire. By noon the Corregidore and the other Gentlemen agreed with us to buy both Cargoes, and to give Hostages for 40,000 Pieces of 8 for the Town, 2 new Ships, and 6 Barks. But neither of us were to sign this Agreement till it was confirm'd by the chief of Men of the Town ashore, which the Corregidore was to procure in an hour's time. April 27. About 1 yesterday Afternoon, the Governor was put ashore in my Pinnace. Some insisted on our stopping him, because not long before an Indian came in a Canoe from the Master Le Camp, and the other Officers ashore, to know whether the Governor had agreed. Because our Barks lay near the Shore, the Spaniards kept to Arms, expecting we might fall on them suddenly, and said they wanted nothing but him, and if he could not come, his Orders when to begin the Fight with us, if we did not agree. This Message was deliver'd in our hearing, and occasion'd disputes among us about keeping him prisoner. Those who were for it urged that if he went ashore the Enemy would certainly fight us, and that as he had broke with us last Night, we might break with him now. But I was utterly against it, since we had given him our word of honour to the contrary, and at last we agreed, and sent him ashore. The 3 Gentlemen stayed with us as Hostages upon the request of the Corregidore, neither they nor we doubting but the Agreement would be ratified ashore. The time allotted for answer being past, a Messenger from the Town came to inform us they could raise but 30,000 Pieces of 8, and not a word of the Trade. So we sent our Linguist and a Prisoner with our final Answer, that if they did not in half an hour send us 3 more good Hostages for the 40,000 Pieces of 8 agreed on, we would take down our Flag of Truce, land and give no quarter, and fire the Town and Ships. In the mean time we saw the Spaniards quit the new Ships, and we took possession of them. Our Messenger returned, and in half an hour 3 men more from the Town came to the Bank against our Barks, holding out a white Handkerchief to parley again. They told us their Resolution was to give us 32,000 Pieces of 8, and no more. So we ordered our Linguist to tell 'em we had done treating, and bid the Spaniards ashore retire forthwith, and keep out of shot of us, if they designed to save their lives. We all at once hauled down our white Flag of Truce, and let fly our English and Field Colours. I ordered 2 of our Guns of about 600 weight each, mounted on Field Carriages, into the great Launch to land before their faces, and we filled our 3 Boats full of Men. I went in our Pinnace, Captain Dover in the Launch, and Captain Courtney in his Pinnace, the 3 Boats landing about 70 Men. We towed the Launch ashore. Mr. Glendall, 3rd Lieutenant of our Ship, tarried aboard our Bark with 10 Men, to ply our Guns over our heads into the Town as we landed. The enemy drew up their horse at the end of the street, which fronted our men and barks, and also lined the houses with men within half musket shot of the bank where we landed. They made a formidable show in respect to our little number that was to attack them. We landed, and fired every man on his knee at the brink of the bank, then loaded, and as we advanced, called to our bark to forbear firing, for fear of hurting our men. We who landed kept loading and firing very fast, but the enemy made only 1 discharge, and retired back to their Guns, where their horse drew up a second time. We got to the first houses, and as we opened the streets, saw 4 Guns pointed at us before a spacious church. But as our men came in sight firing, the horse scoured off. This encouraged me to call to our men to run and seize the Guns, and I immediately hastened toward 'em with 8 or 10 of our men to within pistol shot of the Guns, when we all fired, some at the Gunner, and others at the men in arms at the front of the church, where they appeared very numerous. But by the time we had loaded, and more of our men came in sight, the enemy began to run, and quitted the Guns, after they had fired them with round and partridge shot. One of the last was discharged at us very near, but thanks to God, did us no hurt, and they had not time to reload them. We that were foremost ran into the church, and seized about 10 or 12 prisoners. By that time many of our men were coming up, and Captain Courtney and Captain Dover with the rest of their company came all to the church, where I stayed to secure that post with a few men, the rest marched with them to the other end of the town. From the time we landed till we took their Guns and possession of the church, which lies above a furlong from the water side, I believe was not much above half an hour. I posted Captain Dampier and above 25 Men with Guns, which we turned on the enemy, who had run clear out of the town. By this time the remaining part of our men were landed, and joined me at the church. Then I marched after Captain Courtney and Captain Dover with this latter gang, for most of those that got to the church with me first I could not stop, after I had secured the Guns, so that 7 of 'em ran into the Valley and Woods adjoining to pursue the Spaniards, and having cowards to deal with, came well back. But being offended at their boldness, I reprimanded them, and they promised never to be guilty of the like folly again. All the men in general behaved themselves with great courage, but like sailors could be kept under no command as soon as the first piece was fired. However, it happened much better than we could expect, for now the attack is over, they keep handsomely together, and forbear immoderate drinking. I overtook Captain Dover and Captain Courtney at the other end of the town, and left Captain Dover to keep guard at a church there. As I marched back with Captain Courtney, I left him in the middle of the town at another church, and I came to my first post at the church where the Guns were planted, and sent Captain Dampier with his men to reinforce Captain Courtney and Captain Dover. Thus we were in quiet possession of the town by sunset, and posted our guards, having no opposition after the enemy quitted the great church. In the Evening I went aboard our Boats, settled a good Watch, and secured the Spaniards the Corregidor left behind them. Then I returned ashore to the Church. Captain Dover set the Houses on fire that fronted the Church where he was posted, which burnt all Night and the next Day. There was a Hill near his Quarter, and thick Woods within half shot of the Church, so that the Enemy were almost continually popping at him all Night. He told me that the next Day some Parties appear'd out of the Woods, but when he fired a Volley at 'em they retired. Our Quarters were quiet and out of hearing all Night. The Enemy might have done him mischief had they been courageous, since we were not near enough to assist him in the Night. For the Town being long, we could not keep the whole without dividing at such a distance, but his firing the Houses covered the worst part of his Quarters that Night, which was of great service to him. Captain Courtney relieved him at Daybreak, and they both quitted Captain Dover's Quarters, as being too much exposed to the Enemy. An Indian that I had taken prisoner told us, that he knew of much Money up the River in Bark Logs and Houses; upon which Captain Courtney and I last night detach'd 21 Men out of our Companies, and sent them in his Boat up the River, under the Command of his new Second Lieutenant, Mr. Connely. I would fain have sent both Pinnaces to make the best use of our Time, and seize that Wealth, finding little or none of it in the Town; but the rest would by no means consent to it, lest the Enemy might engage us next Morning, and then we should want our Boats and Men. When I could not possibly prevail for another Boat, and Men enough to man both Pinnaces, I desired Captain Courtney's Boat might go, because the largest, and she was manned out of both our Companies. In the Morning we began with Iron Crows and Mauls to break open the other 2 Churches, and all the Storehouses, Cellars, &c. which was soon done, for no Body was left at home, nor much of value to be found, but Flour, Peas, Beans, and Jars of Wine and Brandy in great plenty. We began to carry it to the Water side, but having sultry, hot, wet, and unhealthful Weather, and our Men being fatigued, they became so weak that they could not work very well at this new Employment. They would fain have had the boarded Floor of the Church taken up to look amongst the Dead for Treasure, fancying the Spaniards might hide their Money there; but I would not suffer it, because of a contagious Distemper that had swept off a great number of People not long before; so that the Church Floor was full of Graves. We had yet found but 2 of the Enemy killed in the Town, and 1 Prisoner who was slightly wounded in the Head; but this Day I heard 15 of 'em were killed and wounded, amongst whom was the chief Gunner, an Irishman that fired the last Gun at us, who had lived some Years amongst them. On our side we had but 2 Men wounded, one of them Yerrick Derrickson, a Dutchman, belonging to my Company, was shot through between the lower part of his Neck and Shoulder, but I believe not mortal; and one John Martin, a Portuguese, mortally wounded aboard the Bark, occasioned by a Cohorn Shell, which split as soon as fired out of our Cohorn Mortar. The Spaniards Force being variously reported by our Prisoners, I'll not insert it until I am better informed. The Fatigue I have had since I left our Ships in this hot Weather, has weakened and disorder'd me very much. April 25. We kept our Colours flying on the Tower of the Church, Captain Dover keeping guard there all day, whilst I and Captain Courtney took care to get every thing we found useful carried to the Water side. Yesterday in the Afternoon we sent the Lieutenant of Puna and another Prisoner into the Country, with Proposals to ransom the Town, a great part of the Enemy being in the Woods, about a League from us. They have but ordinary Quarters because of the great Rain; their Horses being in Parties, and continually in sight, alarm us several times a day. The Prisoners returned to us in the Evening with an ambiguous Answer, but desired they might go again in the Morning to prevent burning the Town. About 10 last night the Boat returned that we had sent up the River, having been from us about 24 hours. They were 7 Leagues up, and 16 of 'em landed at 6 several different places; the other 5 kept the Boat, having a Swivel Gun to defend themselves. At one place they separated, and Mr. Connely with 3 others rambled so far in the Woods to look for Wealth, that after 3 hours search they could not find the way back to the rest, but by accident met again and got to the Boat. William Davis, one of my Men, was shot through the hinder part of the Neck by the Enemy; the Wound was not dangerous, and none the rest hurt. They chased 35 Horsemen well armed that were coming to help those of Guiaquil. The Houses up the River were full of Women, and particularly at one place there were above a dozen handsome genteel young Women well dressed, where our Men got several gold Chains and Ear rings, but were otherwise so civil to them, that the Ladies offer'd to dress 'em Victuals, and brought 'em a Cask of good Liquor. Some of their largest gold chains were concealed and wound about their middles, legs, and thighs, &c. But the gentlewomen in these hot countries being very thin, clad with silk and fine linen, and their hair dressed with ribbons very neatly, our men by pressing felt the chains, &c. with their hands on the outside of the ladies' apparel, and by their linguist modestly desired the gentlewoman to take 'em off and surrender 'em. This I mention as a proof of our Sailors' Modesty, in respect to Mr. Connely and Mr. Selkirk, the late Governor of Juan Fernandez, who commanded this Party. For being young Men, I was willing to do 'em this Justice, hoping the fair Sex will make 'em a grateful Return when we arrive in Great Britain, on account of their civil Behaviour to these charming Prisoners. They called at this House for Provisions as they return'd down from the River, and being so civil at first, they gave their fair Landladies no Uneasiness or Surprize at a second Visit. They took a large empty Bark, but left her up the River, and brought with 'em in Gold Chains, Earrings, and Plate, I believe about £1000 value, with a Negro that had been serviceable in discovering part of the hidden Treasure. But they all agreed that the want of another Boat lost much more than they got; for while they'd search'd and plunder'd one side, the Canoes and Bark logs did cross the River, and carry the People and Purchase out of their reach, for want of another Boat to prevent it. They also inform'd us that in the places where they had been above the Town, they saw more than 300 arm'd Horse and Foot in several Parties, so that we apprehended the Enemy design'd to gain time by pretending to ransom, till with a vast odds they might attack us, and reckon'd themselves sure of Victory: but we for fear of being surprised, agreed to assemble in a Body at every Alarm, which was beat several times a day on the sight of large Parties, tho it hinder'd our Business. We found 5 Jars of Powder, some Match and Shot, with a good quantity of ordinary Arms, 3 Drums with several Swords and Lances, in the Church, where I'd picked the Corregidor's gold headed Cane, and another Captain's with a silver head: for among the Spaniards none carry a Cane but the chief Officers, and of those none under a Captain must wear a Cane with a silver or gold head; so that those Gentlemen were much in haste to leave the Badges of their Office behind them. After Captain Dover had quitted his Post yesterday morning, one of our Men came to tell me that the Enemy was coming down the Hill that way upon us. We beat an Alarm, and leaving part of our Men with the Guns, I march'd with the rest, and met Captain Courtney and part of his Company on the Bridge retiring. He told me the Enemy was numerous and well arm'd in the North End of the Town. I desired him to join us, and we would visit them. He left his chief Lieutenant and the rest of his Men at arms in his Quarters, and we went together with 70 Men to face the Enemy. As we march'd forward, they retired only now and then they shot at us out of the Woods. We looked into the 2 Churches and several Houses, but found nobody. The Woods were very thick, and joined to the backs of the Houses, from whence we had several shot all round us, which we returned at a venture, but none of 'em touch'd us, which was a very great Providence, for it was really strange that they missed us. Captain Courtney and I could not agree to keep that end of the Town, so we march'd back again, took what we liked best into our Boats, and carried it aboard the Barks. April 26. About 1 yesterday in the Afternoon, our Prisoners returned with an Offer of 30,000 Pieces of 8 for the Town, with their Ships and Barks, to be paid in 12 days, which we don't approve of, nor should we stay so long for a greater Sum. But these Delays they design to gain time, that if they don't fight us, they may draw their Forces from Lima; for we know an Express was dispatch'd thither immediately on our Arrival. This morning we sent our final Answer, viz. that they should see the Town all on fire by 3 in the Afternoon, if they did not agree, and give us sufficient Hostages for the above mentioned Sum, to be paid within 6 days; during which time we would grant a cessation of Arms between Guiaquil and Puna, where we expected they would meet us, and purchase our Cargoes. A Frenchman belonging to my Company, whom I sent with the others, by request of Captain Courtney, to strengthen his Quarters, being put Sentinel last night, shot Hugh Tidcomb, one of their Men, so that he died. The accident happened by a too severe order at their Quarters to shoot any in the night that did not answer; and neither this man nor the Sentinel, as I am informed, understood how to ask or answer the Watchword, which by neglect a man was unaccountably lost. Mr. Gardner, one of their Officers, and 9 Men more, yesterday in the Afternoon engaged at the North End of the Town with a Party of Spaniards, whom they chased into the woods, but following 'em too far were attacked by others, and one of our men shot through the calf of his leg, and another of them, while he stopped to relade his piece, was shot against the middle of the pole axe that hung at his side, which made an impression on the iron, and bruised the part under it, so that it proved a piece of armour well placed. The other man, who was wounded in the leg, by his irregularity and hard drinking fell into a fever that carried him off. At the same time Mr. Stratton, Captain Courtney's chief lieutenant, having his pistols hanging at his side, one of them unluckily discharged itself against the outside of the thickest part of his leg, and left a bullet in the flesh. But there's little danger of his life. He being by this accident disabled to make a quick retreat, if occasion required, his captain immediately ordered him on board the bark. Upon these accidents, and perceiving the enemy to increase and grow bolder, Captain Courtney brought his company to my quarters. Last night we all lay in the church, round which we kept sentinels within a musket shot, the sentinels, as customary, calling to each other every quarter of an hour, to prevent their sleeping, and our being surprised in the night. Every man kept his arms and ammunition in exact order by him, and was strictly charged to rise at the least alarm. We unhung a small church bell and sent it aboard for our ship's use. We have done little this 24 hours towards shipping off goods, because the enemy were continually popping at us from the woods. The weather was very wet, hot, and faint, the streets deep and slippery, and the ways to the water side very bad, which mightily incommoded us. Section 11.